See, Bob, this is the reveal. This is the big reveal. They get
I like
ta-da for those wonderful people that are joining us.
I love it.
Live. Oh,
hi, live people.
All right. That's right. We're going to go live here in 3, 2, 1. The wrong move that the largest number of people will make after week 1 is that more this week on the couch. Bob Harris, help the people not go astray. What's the move that's wrong that the largest number of people are going to make after week 1 of the season?
Anything that involves a panic button or the notion of a panic button or a instant reaction move. Like everything we do in fantasy sports is best done with a little logic and a little less emotion. So divorce the emotion. I've been preaching this for years. Divorce the emotion from the decision-making process. And I say this knowing it's relatively impossible to completely do so, right? There's going to be some investment. We have an emotional investment in players we've researched and built narratives and told happy stories to ourselves about. And sometimes, you have to know when to let go of the narrative, but I don't think you should be ready to just release it 1 week into the season. And this is the thing I get the most questions about on Sirius and, I got to move on from this guy. No, Aaron Rodgers is probably going to be okay, people.
Right.
And so I get the instant reaction and the anger that comes when, the things we wanted to come true don't come true, but we're grown up adults, even when we're not, because I'm totally not.
Speak for yourself.
But I'm able to play one on the interwebs, a grown up adult. And so that's the challenge in all this is reacting in the moment to something in a rational manner that doesn't punish you for the first move, but that actually forwards what you're trying to do. And some of that is going to come, through waiver wires and decisions you make on who to release and how to clear room on your rosters to do this and not to do it in haste, but also to do it in haste because your waiver wire is coming, right? These are the things we're up against, right? And so that's why, divorcing the emotion and sitting down and making cold, calculated decisions based on not the emotion of a moment, but the bigger picture. Like, my big thing. Don't look down the drinking straw. What happened this minute is not what's happened, right? It's what happened this minute. And there are pieces that came before that helped inform why we're in this spot. And there are pieces that are going to come after. And the way you assess those pieces that are coming after and deal with them is how, is ultimately how your success will be determined.
You're right. In the idea that you don't want to get too emotional and it can be quite make you seasick, Bob, NFL week to week, right?
Oh,
especially
man,
in the cold open of the season into week 1 is maybe the one that's going to have you puking over the railing the most, but even week 2, and then maybe by the time we get to week 4 or 5, we start to understand the waves, the currents, and it's not as queasy.
And what we need to keep in mind is what is today is not tomorrow and a month from now and even further out. I'm old enough to remember when Tom Brady could not complete a pass downfield beyond 20 yards. That was like the entire first half of last season before he ended up being the best downfield passer in the NFL by the time all was said and done. So everything evolves, right? I mean, so you're looking at a situation. So people come in and, we look at it and we say, oh, this is what happened. This is what it is. Yes, this is what it is now. Like, look, nobody is more heavily invested in Brandon Aiyuk than I am. Nobody is more.
Let's cut to the chase, Bob.
Nobody is in a bigger panic over this. Is a real world example of where we're at. I'm heartbroken. I'm crushed. I'm, at the development where he barely saw any time at all. And Trent Sherfield, who's obviously been spending way too much time with Larry Fitzgerald. Stop it, Trent. It comes on, but we see, as you're sitting here and you're trying to work through the emotions, we can say, oh, look, Kyle Shanahan didn't send just that message. He's sending multiple messages to open the season in a very Shanahanian way, right? With the Trey Sermon being sat down and Aiyuk not getting the time, and you're hearing, the local reporters suggesting, oh, he's not sure, he's not taking it seriously enough. He's got to learn how to be a pro. That was, I think, the phrase I heard. That sounds like it comes right from the coaching staff, right? Somebody needs to learn a damn lesson, and this is how you're learning it, by watching from the sideline. So in this moment, I mean, how do you, look, I'd love to panic and turn loose all the shares and find somebody who's going to be an immediate producer for me. But if I think at some point Brandon Aiyuk is going to be the guy he was down the stretch last season, I know there was injuries, there was all kinds of things, but he also had lousy quarterbacks. Yet he was the third most heavily targeted wide receiver in the NFL down the stretch last season. And the 49ers investment in him suggests they wanted him to be that. I should probably dial back my disappointment a little bit.
Yeah, look, I think that we can say the absolute wrong move on Aiyuk is to drop him. Okay, I don't even care how shallow your bench is. Now, it could be right to trade him for 50 cents on the dollar right now.
Might be
right to trade for him at 50 cents on the dollar right now. And this one is particularly interesting because it isn't quite like week one. Because there's a lot of week one situations, Bob, where like the snaps were there, the soil that fantasy grows out of, fantasy points grow out of was there, but the production wasn't. But in Aiyuk's case, you're one step down the Dante Pettis road. Just one step.
But a big step.
He get the message? Will he get the message?
Yes.
And it wasn't as explicit with Trey Sermon. So there's any number of directions.
Yeah, with Trey Sermon, there's some moving pieces, right? Like he doesn't play special teams. Maybe the message is play special teams, but but probably not. Now that we just learned Raheem Mostert is done for the year, he's having the season-ending surgery, as he announced on his Twitter moments ago. I think that entire dynamic changes, right? I mean, the guys, it's as likely next week 2 that Trey Sermon is the lead component in that backfield as Elijah Mitchell or Michael Hasty. I mean,
right.
And Kyle Shanahan is going to make this as goofy as he can for all of us and as awkward as he can for all of us because that's the way he rolls. But look, there were other things, right? Like the Jamaal Williams, DeAndre Swift split, which ended up working out. Like if you were the DeAndre Swift investor, you're going as you're hearing the pregame report and going, oh no, it's going to be all Jamaal Williams. And it kind of was for a series, but then everything evened out. And maybe that was your expectation all along, or maybe you expected Swift to have a true feature role. Either way, the production at least, mitigated whatever disaster you perceive that to be. So there's going to be a lot of these situations early in the season. And I think the big thing is not to assume anything is permanent week one, other than Aaron Rodgers is probably going to remain the starting quarterback of the Green Bay Packers for the rest of the season.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe.
And again, there's a million things to sort through here, and we are going to get to some specific actionable takes. But it's funny, as we're talking, Kerryon Johnson is signed to the 49ers practice squad. Just to complicate things, practice squad. Of course, you got to love the new, more liberal practice squad rules. Okay, let's step through. Let's step through some of these things one by one, because as you said, you don't want to overreact, but you have to react if you're doing your waiver wire. Elijah Mitchell. Folks listen to the waiver wire show this morning know how I feel about it. How strong to the hole we got? Mostert out for the year. Kerryon Johnson on the practice squad. How strong to the hole do you go for Elijah Mitchell?
For me, not very strong, but I've been hashing this out with people since last night. And I mean, even the people I know that are the most ardent waiver wire divers, the people who are the most aggressive, Mike Dempsey, my co-host on Sirius in particular, would probably only go maybe 30% of his fab budget. I would probably go less, right?
That's still 30%.
I think he's usually very aggressive. He would normally be aggressive diving in. So the fact that he is not like spending 80% of his fab money tells you something, just for a little perspective. For me, I'm probably not chasing it. Will I throw down a few dollars? Sure, on the off chance I get them. But I'm hoping I've built a better roster that I have more reliable players, depth players on my roster than Elijah Mitchell, who maybe gets some run for some period of time. Maybe the run we saw is the only run he gets all season long. I mean, this is within the range of possible outcomes. Probably not the most likely end of the range, but I just don't see him being the kind of player they rely on to be the leading component. We have to remember Jeff Wilson's coming back at some point too. And he's pretty much, last year, I mean, I had a hard time discerning between he and Raheem Mostert when the ball was in their hands. They looked very similar. And now I can't tell who anity is because everyone quit changing your numbers.
Right. We need a scorecard. We need a program.
But yeah, I'm not chasing Mitchell hard. What are you doing?
Well, you're probably the wise one here, Bob, but I think you go strong for Elijah Mitchell. And I'll make it simple. The simplest way I can put it is you buy the situation. Buy the situation, okay? And that even, throw a couple of units at Hasty. If Sermon gets dropped, swoop in on him. If you have an IR spot to stash Jeff Wilson, go in. I think this is going to be a very good situation. Even last year, when quarterback play was, sometimes Mostert and Wilson were viable. And anytime Wilson got the workload mostly to himself, he was a stud running back one.
Yep.
So the value is going to be there in this backfield. Now, Shanahan could mess with us, but as long as it's 2 players, as long as it's not 3 players getting consistent touches, as long as it's 2, there's at least flex or running back 2 value there. And when it's concentrated on one, it's massive. The other thing is, Bob, I'm just being super simplistic when I do this, okay? Mitchell got an opportunity last week. He looked good in the opportunity.
He did.
It's like inertia. It's inertia. Now, here's my background. I made this speech on the waiver wire show. I'm going to make it again for folks that didn't listen to it. Number one, only 2 or 3 players on the waiver wire are going to be difference makers this year. Any year, really, like true difference makers. There aren't many, okay? And number 2, the earlier you get a player in the season, the more they can help you. So Mike's 30%. I say 25 to 50% with Mitchell, which I think is aggressive. I mean, you're spending up to half of your year's budget for Mitchell, but I see it as an intersection of opportunity, and we've seen the ability now. I mean, it's the Shanahan system. Mike Anderson, Orlando Scary. We could go on and on and on, right? Don't think like, oh, well, he doesn't have the pedigree. It's the Shanahan system. If he fits in the system, he fits in the system. He fits in the system, okay? And then it could be one of these things that are frustrating to watch, but I see a good situation, a running back who's got an opportunity, who's produced already with that opportunity. I don't know how many more of those chances to buy a ticket on that train we're going to get, Bob.
Yeah, and that would be kind of the Dempsey approach. And by the way, he says he would spend a quarter, which he then figured out would be actually be 31% by the time he got done doing all the manipulations and machinations he would do to say, I want to spend a quarter, but somebody else is too. So anyhow, I look, and I get that. So, but I think, it's just as likely that, Matt Waldman's favorite running back, Trey Sermon, is the guy who ends up getting this. That to me seems like the more likely outcome. I need the player to deliver on this. Like so many times, Sig, we do these things based on, our desired outcomes. I try to dial that in with my perception of the coaching staff's desired outcome is. Sometimes that's easier than others. I mean, like Bruce Arians will constantly tell us what his desired outcome is. And it doesn't always happen, though. It's easy to figure out what he wants to happen, but it's hard to, the players have to deliver on that. And that's always the tricky piece, right? Circumstances have to work in their favor. You're right. The opportunity is what we're usually buying with running backs. And I don't know how, and we don't know at this point how many running backs are going to get that kind of opportunity. What we do know is every year a running back somebody didn't draft is going to win somebody a championship, right? I mean, it's almost inevitable. And so if you want to jump in on Mitchell for that reason alone, like I'm not against it. I'm more of a, hold my fire kind of guy until I see something I really feel super confident in. I don't feel super confident in this just because of the presence of Sermon. I'm not reading into the week 1 absence that, and we heard some of the code words there too. Oh, hasn't been practicing with intensity was such like, again, seems more like a message sent. Message might well be sent, right? That might be all it took to spur him on to greater heights. So you are right in that Mitchell has given the opportunity. Mitchell ran with it and did well. And could well continue to carry on with it. Shanahan's history suggests to me that's probably not the case, that he would prefer a different kind of back as the lead piece of his committee. But it'll be a committee, and it'll be frustrating for us all along. And that may be the bigger issue, is we're all sitting here expending a lot of energy on a backfield that is going to disorient us all season long.
It could be. And again, I'm just trying to make it so it doesn't have to be Mitchell. But I want people to be realistic about the waiver wire. There's only going to be 2 or 3 true difference makers. So when you're making your waiver wire claims and you're putting in those amounts and you're putting in bigger amounts, put in an amount on the player that you think has a chance to be that guy as we go through the season. Don't just nickel and dime yourself and spend 5 and 10 here and there for players that are just going to be Band-Aids. So let's
that's why I hold my fire, though. I just want to say that is why I hold my fire. If I was confident that Mitchell was this guy, I'd go in 80%. I'd be fine with that. I'd save myself a couple bucks to cover for an injury or something. But I just don't think that's not where I'm at in terms of my expectations for him.
Yeah, and I'm not even 100% clear, like if it was Sermon or Mitchell, if you had a choice between either one right now. I'm not sure which one. I'm not sure. So yeah,
I'm not either.
I mean, I would rather be able to have both. Let's hit a couple of the other difficult choices on the waiver wire this week. Which Denver wide receiver are you going after, or none of the above, or both?
Maybe it depends on how my roster is constructed. If I'm looking for a safe play, I need a guy that's going to maybe not give me a 0 any week. Maybe it's Tim Patrick. If I want to maybe take the upside play, it's probably Hamler, or KJ Hamler would be the player that I would, try to get in it. And that would be if I have some really solid, if I got Robert Woods or Cooper Kupp or, some pieces that I think is going to have those huge weekly catch totals, or at least a really good catch totals, and I'm looking for more of a big play threat, I'm going to probably go with Hamler. But I think Patrick is has been overlooked for a couple of years for what he's able to do and what he does do when he's asked to do it. So he would probably be depending on roster construction, he would be my first choice. Hopefully I have a roster constructed where I just need somebody who can, carry me through some weeks and keep me from getting zeros. And I think, as we saw last week, he can also score touchdowns. So,
by the way, folks, I want to remind you, if you are looking for this kind of news analysis that you get Football Guys in your inbox every morning, go to join.footballguys.com/couch, sign up for our free newsletter, takes from me, Cecil, Joe Bryant, and it'll keep you on top of everything because it moves pretty fast here in the fantasy football season, Bob. Let's try to slow down for a second and look at another situation where it's not clear. Which Baltimore running back do you want off the waiver wire?
So I think Tyson Williams is going to be gone. So I'm assuming he's not available.
Oh, okay. Well, go ahead. I mean, Murray's the one's available, but let's just say if you could have your choice between Murray and Williams, if you could, have
I would want Williams. I want Williams right now. He looks like he has a little more wiggle, maybe a little more juice right now. Watching early in the game, I thought Murray seemed to be a little bit slow. Maybe it was just getting up to speed in the offense. By the end of the night, I didn't notice that he looked as slow, right? And the touchdown run was fantastic. So I'd be willing to, there's a number of leagues where I rostered him anyway, prior to getting released by Saints, even thinking he might get released by the Saints, hoping someone would pick him up. He did. And then when the circumstances developed in Baltimore, I thought, wow, what an ideal fit. I think he's a guy that would be worth chasing, even if you feel like Williams is the guy, because they're going to use more than one guy. And as we saw last night, either of them are capable of getting the job done. My preference would be Williams, though.
I went back and forth on this one, Bob. I ended up with Murray just because it's a coaching staff trust issue, going by how things went along down the stretch if they were playing Murray right off the street.
Sure.
But part of me wanted to still go with Williams because he passes the eye test. He has more to offer than Murray. But if Murray
more juice.
If Murray gets the trust, then Murray gets the goal line carries. And Murray can be as good as Mark Ingram was like 2 years ago. Sure. Ingram was a fourth round pickup. They're both good pickups, though. I mean, again, do they have a chance to be a true season changer? Probably not. But sometimes that number 2 running back, having that guy for bye weeks, injuries, emergencies, can be a thing. And remember, just like last year, we're probably going to have unexpected player unavailability as we go through the season. All right. Let's talk about, you mentioned Aaron Rodgers. So I'm going to assume, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Bob, but I'm just going to assume that you're saying, hey, there's nothing to learn from how the Packers played. There's nothing to learn. There's just disregard it. It's almost like week 1 is coming up this weekend. Thankfully, it's Monday night against Detroit.
Should help.
Am I characterizing that correctly?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, just week 1 is always wacky, right? There are weird outcomes and things that we think are now what the world is that are really not. They're just snapshots of a moment. And I think this was a snapshot of a moment. Packers don't often play great on either coast, right? For whatever reason. I mean, I'm not making excuses for them. They just don't. I'm sure they would, I think Aaron Rodgers has talked about it, but especially their California games, they just tend not to show up. And this was another one where they just didn't show up. If you watch that game, I mean, nothing was working for a single person on that side of the ball. So, and everything was working on the other side of the ball. They could do no wrong. So I think it's just a moment that will be forgotten by the time we get halfway through the season. Nobody will be talking about this except Jameis Winston, because he threw 5 touchdowns. Sure. He should talk about it all year long.
Wilting in the heat. The Packers.
It was, there's so much emotion pent up, heading into the season. I'm sure, not just for Rodgers, but for Davante Adams and all these things. I mean, and we talk about this, building the narrative in your mind. I mean, you can imagine Aaron Rodgers, not saying he's a vindictive sort of person, but everything he can do to make the Packers slightly more miserable as he's walking out the door. One of them would be making Davante Adams the best wide receiver ever in the history of the game, right? I mean, just so they'd have to pay, just things like that. I mean, I could tell myself that story all day long, and I don't think that story's fallen flat on its face with one bad game. And there may be more bad games. And just like, Ezekiel Elliott, investors should not be panicking over the run-pass balance in that first game. Clearly, they had a plan going in, Dallas, and I'm not sure they were wrong based on the outcome. They didn't win the game, but the way they were able to move the football through the air, they've got some really good receiving components. Maybe this is a new normal. Something we have to live with is going to be a pass-heavier approach, but it might be just a matchup dictated move, right? It might be something they decided going in. Hey, we're going to test this secondary a little more than we're going to test this front seven, because I don't know if we can pull this off given our limitations on the offensive line with Zach Martin out that game.
Yeah, and Dak Prescott looked good enough. Zeke, I mean, there were times that Prescott didn't look completely comfortable, but he was effective. Yeah. Zeke maybe was, I still think Pollard looks like he has more juice, but it'll be there against the Chargers. And there's a lot of these situations, Bob, we can look at it as both positive or negative, right? Like how much of it was the specific game and game script, and how much of it is maybe a harbinger of what's going to come. There's so many things I want to sift through, positive, negative, but since I made a right turn there, let's make a right turn into this. When we look back at week one, will we say it was Kyler Murray, or will we say it was the Tennessee defense?
We'll say it was week one. Well, so there were some things I really liked about there were some things I really liked about this. Look, odds are it's more likely Kyler Murray than just week one. But part of it is it has to be Cliff Kingsbury unleashing Kyler Murray. And I kind of think that's what we saw, right? So, coming into the season, the talk, the hot seat talk, all these things, he's got to do better. And they all knew this going in. But one of the other complaints was, for an offensive mastermind, his offense is kind of, predictable. Kind of, they didn't rely heavily on motions and, changing up formations. That's something they did this week, was tons of motion, I noticed. And so, and they have some additional weapons, so, I mean, I think they have plenty of directions to go with the football. I thought the running back usage was really nice, kind of split down the middle. Look, I think some of this is on Cliff Kingsbury, and just based on the narrow band, I think he gets it. And if he can continue to do that and really free up Kyler Murray to do the things that we've all expected Kyler Murray to do, look, he's pretty much done, right? I mean, It's not like Kyler Murray has been an abject failure. It's just the Cardinals didn't get didn't get the brass ring or whatever. So, I think there's a lot there to like. And I think by the end of the season, we'll be saying, wow, it looks like these guys really finally put it together in terms of, the reason those two are there together, right? There's a reason that coach and that quarterback are together. I think this is the season we at least see the full effort made to demonstrate the power of that.
Yeah, I always liked how unique that story was, Bob, that a coach and a quarterback were making eyes at each other for 5 or 6 years. And then everything in the universe comes together. The coach takes over a team, that he gets the keys to the franchise. They have the number one pick. It happens to be when this player is coming in the draft. And the other part, I've been bringing this up, Kyler Murray hasn't really had a full offseason in football until this year. A quote unquote normal offseason. I don't know how normal it was really, but he doesn't really even have a process yet. And if Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury start to come together in the way you're describing, I like the optimism about Kyler. He could be far and away the number one fantasy quarterback this year.
Yep,
he was on his way. He and Russell Wilson were roughly tied through about 10 weeks. And then Wilson, the offense, lost their oomph. Murray got dinged up. Go ahead.
No, I totally agree with you. Everything you said there is 100% true. And I think if you also see a full buy-in from the front office, from management, right? And the pieces they brought in, it's nice to sit there and talk about, hey, we expect these guys to do better. This is the year they have to do something. Well, this is also the year they have to do something, and we're going to help them. Seems like or at least put in all the effort we can, whether it works out or not, depends again on the players on the field. But It's not like everybody didn't put in the required effort to make changes, make positive changes. And I think we saw a little bit of the residual of that in week one. I think we also saw a Titans offense that hasn't worked together extensively over the course of summer. And that's something we're seeing a lot, with multiple teams. But I think it really showed up in a number of different ways, right? I mean, whether it was the blocking turns out wasn't very good. And also, I mean, I just didn't, I mean, I say that went from the coaches on down, right? So I just thought everybody on that side of the ball has something to answer to for that performance against Arizona.
Well, judging by Zeke, what you said about Zeke, what you said about the Packers, you would make trades for those guys at like 80 cents on the dollar. Okay.
Sure.
And again, what about the Tennessee guys? What about Julio?
Yes.
What about Tannehill? What
Absolutely.
about
Julio? I'm not 100% in on anyway. I mean, look, he's a super great player, and there's a lot of targets open. I like all that stuff. My bigger concern, and I'm assuming some things here, is that Todd Downing doesn't materially change the offensive approach left into him from Arthur Smith. And, maybe he does. But the pass efficiency is something that, we've seen for a couple of years, and I think they're capable of it. I don't know if Julio Jones is capable of being, or needs to be a part of it, right? They were in the bottom 5 in pass attempts last year, fewer than 500 pass attempts. So, and all of A.J. Brown's numbers tend to come on a really narrow band. You look at the routes run and all the metrics that you would normally associate with a breakout or a super high-end fantasy performance. He doesn't have all those. And so, but yet he still gets the job done. And Ryan Tannehill, as the quarterback there, does the same thing. I mean, he's been top 10 quarterback since he showed up in that starting lineup. And a lot of it's based on efficiency. And some of that is based on, the presence of Derrick Henry. So I like those 3 pieces. The rest of the pieces, if I got something out of them, that'd be great. But those would be the pieces I'd be looking to buy cheap.
Okay, 80 cents on the dollar. Let's stay with the 80 cents on the dollar. And you can adjust it how you want, the number. But players that you might have a buy low opportunity on. Okay. Robert Woods.
Oh, yeah. All day long.
Ooh.
I don't think you can go wrong with any of these receivers. I mean, Cooper Kupp had the big game. If you think that's going to be, a static situation all season long, and that the target shares and the catch totals are going to be, that all week, yes, you're probably not going to be interested. You're probably going to be selling to me, and I'm going to happily be buying Robert Woods, because I think that number is going to vary from week to week, and Robert Woods is going to end up the season. Both of those guys, he and Kupp, are capable of being top 10 this year.
Okay. Mike Evans.
I'll buy that on 80 cents on the dollar. I mean, I'll buy 7 straight 1,000-yard seasons. So it's funny because I don't have a lot of shares of him, of Bucks wide receivers not named Antonio Brown, because I'm so often drafting the cheap component or the cheapest piece of those things, that I have tons of Antonio Brown. I'm very happy to have him. In the cases where I didn't, I went more Evans than Godwin, because those drafts, Godwin was going earlier. But I don't think, this one game. I do know that one of the things I said, Bruce Arians, his desired outcome, he makes no secret of that. He wants Chris Godwin to be the tip of that, receiving spear. Right. And so, and I'm fine with that. That doesn't mean Mike Evans won't have huge games, and I'll have a piece of that. Every down's passing down to Tampa.
Right. Especially with that backfield and how little trust they are generating. I guess, Bob, there's a theme here in your advice about players that underperform week one. You said, don't panic, be willing to buy them at a discount, be willing to trust that all of us, when we put our minds together in the preseason, had it roughly right. So I'll just ask you this as an open-ended question then, Bob. Who are you worried about? And if it's no one, is there anything that could happen in week one that would make you say, yes, you have to act?
Injuries. I mean, Raheem Mostert happens. I mean, but aside from that, I'm trying not to, right? I mean, that's my desired state, is to be saying, okay, this is 1 week, deal with it, get past it. There comes a point, though, when you're 4 weeks into the season and you don't have a win, where you say, damn, I needed to have done something. I get that, I get that as well, right? So, and that's the fine line we have to walk, right? So I like to give it a couple weeks and wait to see if I can sense a trend developing. One game is not a trend to me. It's indicative of nothing other than the fact it's one game, and it's the first game. And if there's going to be a game with, the most volatile range of outcomes, that's the game it's going to be. And so I'm trying not to, there are things that worry me like crazy. I'd like to have seen Josh Allen throw with kind of similar accuracy to what we saw last year and not miss as many throws. But I'm not looking to sell Josh Allen either. So, I mean, I could think of a long list of things that concern me greatly. We mentioned the Brandon Aiyuk. There are more, but for the most part, I'm more interested in looking for the other side of the coin, guys who maybe disappointed people or people who are disillusioned with what to me is almost certainly a temporary development, and see if I can't leverage that and gain some value.
Yeah, and I think that's the side that is easier to play in a way because again, it's that emotion. Now there's another side, and emotion skews our rational thought, and otherwise we do things that we wouldn't do because we're influenced by emotion. But there is another side of that that's exuberance, being really excited and maybe overreacting in that fashion. So we already talked about Kyler Murray and saying, hey, maybe he really is going to be, this is a harbinger and not just play everyone against Tennessee, Seattle this week, by the way. But let's talk a couple of other of these situations that exceeded expectations. You already brought up the Detroit running backs. And there was a question Benny asked in the chat room. How do we feel about Jamaal? I'm assuming Jamaal Williams. Season long, will we trade him away for 49ers or Ravens running back? I think that's a good yardstick, right? Because we got 2 49ers running backs we're looking at. We got 2 Ravens running backs we're looking at. We know those situations are productive situations. We didn't think the Lions situation would be a productive situation, and we didn't have clarity, and they're both running back ones. Maybe it's because there's no wide receivers. Maybe it's because, and that's the thing, running backs on teams that are going to be playing from behind, we usually are shying away from. But if they're 2 of the best 3 receivers on the team, right. So are you clutching Jamaal Williams and saying, no way am I trading him away for a timeshare back, no matter how good the situation is, back without clarity? Do we have clarity about Jamaal Williams and DeAndre Swift for that matter? Or was this one of those sell high moments?
That's the point. I think the point you made is the point. I mean, would I trade him away for a running back with a clearer path to workload? Yes. Would I trade him away for a running back with that clouded, ambiguity of roles, where I'm going to be playing the same game every week? No. I'm going to hang on to the guy I already hate. I mean, so I mean, that's what I'm drafting. I'm drafting, for clear path to workload early in drafts, right? More than just about anything. Like, yes, I want talented players and good offenses and all that. I also want guys that are going to have opportunities. And so I have tons of Jamaal Williams because he was available late. I don't have much DeAndre Swift because of there was just a little bit of back and forth in what the coaches were saying, and I could tell myself, a different version of the talk about that backfield from the coaching staff really easily. Like, when Anthony Lynn's saying, yeah, Jamaal Williams is my type A back. He runs between the tackles. He can catch the ball. He does all these things. And while he's saying all that, even as he was saying the words, I'm thinking, and Austin Eckler is like a total type B running back. And look what he did for everybody. So, I think both these backs play ball. I'm probably holding on that one on Jamaal Williams just because I got him so cheap. Maybe if I thought I was really making a huge upgrade to a locked in featured role, type player, I would be willing to do it. I just don't think I'm going to get there with him right now.
And this really could be just every single week what happens.
Right.
Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat.
Your point is well taken. I mean, on a team, and we know this week Tyrell Williams, who didn't necessarily show up much in the opener, and besides, he's wearing number 6. Nobody knows who you are, Tyrell. The notion that those 3 players, Hawkinson, Swift, and Williams, are going to be the offense, that's not a ridiculous thought, right? I mean, it's just, those receivers are not going to add a ton to this offense.
Okay, looking at a few more players on the positive side. Okay, and again, I can think of these things also as we step through the season, Bob, we're going to recontextualize what we already saw. So what we already saw can change, right?
Sure.
What we think week 1 means is going to change after we see week 2. And there's a range of what it could mean. So let's look at this one. Are we going to care more about playing everybody against Atlanta? Or are we going to say, no, Jalen Hurts, actually, he's going to be the franchise quarterback for this team?
I'm saying both of those things can be true, right? You don't be
sure.
trapped
It doesn't
in
have
the
to be
one
either
idea.
You're right.
So, and Atlanta looks horrible. I mean, everything about them looks disappointing, except for their first half rushing attack. And by the way, I gotta shout out Orlando Ledbetter, who from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, who for months has been telling me every chance he gets, and my serious audience, Cordero Patterson is going to have a role in this offense. They love him. They love it. Just
right.
Every week I'm going, oh my God. But beyond that, Jalen Hurts, that was a super good matchup for him, right? I think he's going to be just fine. And, he is, the Rich Rebar, Konami Code quarterback, embodied and all those things. And I think the floor is so high that he's going to be a top 10 quarterback. I've thought that all off season long. But this was a superior matchup. Going back to last year, what the Falcons struggled stopping. I mean, I think some pretty immobile quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins ran for 80 yards against them. I think 80 plus yards.
Right.
So I mean, I think this seemed inevitable. The big game for Jalen Hurts out of the chute. And look, maybe he has some better complementary pieces around him that'll help him out a little more. Says Devontae Smith. So I think he's going to be good. And don't dismiss Jalen Reagor year 2. Not asked to be a primary piece. So. And the Falcons, I don't have a lot of hope for a quick turnaround. Maybe I'm hoping I'm wrong on that one, and they figure out how to pass protect it at the very least, or maybe they just go back and look at the film and say, oh wow, that running thing was working pretty well. We should do some more of that.
Yeah, it seemed like Kyle Pitts was helping. Oh, Kyle Pitts! It seemed like he was helping them run the ball more than he was helping them by being productive, although he got the targets. Again, there's a lot of situations where players got targets or at least snaps, didn't quite cash in the way we'd hope, but especially for young players, I would echo Bob's call to patience there. You got to be patient.
Right.
Right?
Think about the investment you made in a player and why you made that investment. Don't think about what you saw this Sunday. Going back to just what you were just saying, Bloom. I mean, it's just what is this week is not. We're going to create a story, and each week is a piece of that story that adds on to the last. And I'm realizing there's it's like a piston going up against that spark plug, and the combustion is going to happen. And that combustion is, I can't be 0-4, or I can't, I got to get to my playoffs, right? And that so. That's the fuel that's going to explode if you allow. So you need to be making reasonable moves, though, I would contend, as opposed to reactionary moves. And it's difficult, man. I'm not even I sit here and talk about it all the time. And I can't tell you how many reactionary moves I'll make in the 1,000 leagues I'm in here in the next coming days.
Absolutely. We still have to make an all or nothing decision, even though inside of us it feels like 50-48. Sometimes, and then you're right. 0-1, it's not time to panic yet. Although you can look, Bob had J.K. Dobbins on so many teams. I was panicking before the season started. Some of my teams were J.K. Dobbins and Trey Sermon as my top 2 running backs. Yeah. So I'm beyond panic. I'm in the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross stages of grief already. But 0-2, just like in the NFL, 0-2 is when you really start to feel some urgency. 0-3, 0-4. It might be time to play spoiler. Okay.
Oh yeah. Yes. 0-3 is where I start, considering, but also just go to your league's site, look at your points for and points against. Sometimes that can be comforting. Sometimes you're playing really well and you just happen to run into teams that are playing slightly better. I think that should help inform what your decision-making process is like, oh, look, I'm super competitive. I'm in these games. Right. And these yo-yos are they're having their best weeks against me. And all I need is a game where my team does what it does and another team does what they normally do. So, just look at all those things and put it all in that context when you're trying to, before you start jumping off any proverbial free agent bridges or trade deals that you don't need to.
Right. Actually, just as a tangent, Bob, since again, you are one of the venerable voices of the fantasy football world. What do you think about the idea? Because we've seen a lot of changes in how league standings are structured, right? Like there'll be double headers, or there'll be one all play score, 1-0 or 0-1. You know, if you're above the average score, or even some, I think leagues go to all play record and things like that. Now, I think it's just like the NFL. I mean, there's schedule luck in the NFL. You catch teams when they're hurt. You catch teams when they're not hurt. You know, it's just how it goes. You can't play defense in fantasy football. And that's one of the things people say when I say, well, it's just like the NFL with the schedule luck. And I've talked about this, and maybe someone can mess around with it, but I like the idea of playing defense where something like you can apply a 50% reduction to one of their players and like a 25% reduction to another player, and they get to do the same for you. So that's a way to introduce defense. So at least you can test your acumen on, it's kind of the opposite of lineup setting. But what do you think, for the good old leagues that just play one team a week and that's your 1-0 and that's what determines if you go to the playoffs? Do you like that, or do you think it needs to change?
So in the magazine leagues that we do for all our fantasy sports publication magazines, we generally tend to, best records are two of the playoff teams, and high score are also come into play. So, so you do give people who put together good rosters and just had some bad luck. Sometimes I think like that's coddling, like just get over it. Yeah, you had a bad, but also, I mean, I can see the merit to that. You put together a good team, you want to be rewarded for it in the end. So, look, part of this is we control our own leagues. So you sit down and you haggle it out with your league mates and you figure out what works for you. And I know a lot of people in the leagues where we do the points totals really appreciate that. I have very few people complain about it. And, in the fantasy world, people are not shy about complaining about rules that they don't care for. You'll be surprised to learn. Sources tell me. My sources being unhappy. So I think, there's a broad enough spectrum of types of leagues we can play in now that I think you can find one that suits your needs, right? That you can go out there and say, oh, look, this league is exactly what I want. They don't do any of the crap that I think is stupid. And everything is like traditional and standard in the way I like it. And then there's another like, wow, they do all this crazy stuff. I love this. This is totally different. So go out and find that league, or create that league and find people to play in it. If it's an issue for you, I'm fine with whatever. Like if as long as I know the rules going into something, I'm perfectly happy playing to those rules and understanding the shortcomings that they impose on me and the benefits I may gain from them. So that's kind of the approach I would take. And that's the great thing about fantasy sports is we create it, right? We can make whatever we want out of it.
It is that way. And you absolutely should know, Bob, as one of the creators with a capital C of this sandbox that we're playing in. But I like you. I'm easygoing. They're all different puzzles. Just tell me the puzzle and I'll try my best to solve the puzzle. I'll try and
show me the front of the box. Show me the front of the box.
I'm not a purist about PPR or I do think Superflex and 2 quarterback formats just make quarterback decisions more interesting, add more layers of strategy. So I generally am in favor of more layers, probably because we just spend so much time staring at this. Go ahead, Bob.
Right. I'm with you on that. I just think it brings the value of the quarterback more in line with the value of the NFL quarterback, right? So, when in one quarterback leagues, I mean, they're everywhere, growing on trees. In a 2 quarterback league, you're going, oh, this is a thing. And I'm fine with, premium scoring for tight ends is great. But more and more as I've gotten more into this, I mean, I'm, also into, IDP leagues with 50-man rosters and, full starters on both sides of the balls and things like that 15 years ago, I go, I don't even, what do you mean IDP? Get out of here with that trash, So, I mean, I think keeping an open mind to all these things and trying them out. Look, one of the things I love about the Scott Fish Bowl is they're out there trying to set some trends and create some new ideas and try new things. They change the scoring system up every year. And I love seeing other leagues adopt some of those changes and roll with them. And I like, finding leagues that create new challenges. Mike Clay has a league that I'm in that's, you got to start at least 6 wide receivers. There's like no bench. You got like a 4-man bench, 6-man bench. It just, different things that, and you can, like, I'm in all of these and I love all of them. And I think that's that's kind of the key, is just embracing what you're facing and looking at it as a challenge. I mean, that's part of the reason why we play fantasy sports. We like a challenge. We're competitive.
Yeah. And it's unsolvable. I mean, that's the thing. It's so difficult. It's like holding on to the mechanical bull. It's so difficult. You're in
Right.
Texas now, Bob. So I'm going to bring up mechanical
Yeah.
bulls.
Hey, y'all.
Okay. Before we go off the rails here in a couple minutes, because we always do here for the last few minutes of the couch, I want to get your take on not specific fantasy, although there maybe are fantasy takeaways, but I also know that narrative belongs in fantasy football. You're tuned into the story, Bob. You're tuned into the big picture stories and how these stories then can trickle down, ripple through to fantasy football. Okay. Couple of teams that I just felt a disturbance in the force, if you will. Let's start with the Jags. I know Trevor Lawrence threw 3 touchdowns and all the wide receivers ended up being good plays. I know, there's a James Robinson thing. Is any wide receiver or running back, going to matter for this team? But also, I can't help but think of names, Bob, like Nick Saban, like Bobby Petrino. You could feel it whenever USC's job came open, right?
Right.
USC fired their head coach. And I think there was one thought that just rippled through the hive mind all at once, which is, well, there's where Urban Meyer can go.
Urban Meyer's writing his Bobby Petrino note.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, do you think that it's crazy to even invoke that? What kind of vibe are you getting? Because I just can't get anything positive out of week 1 for the Jags.
So I've felt all along watching the missteps of Urban Meyer, whether it's going back to, trying to explain away some of his hires that ended up being questionable, but with basically just saying, I'm the coach. Well, that work, in college, you're the huge fish in a little pond and you get to run roughshod over everybody. When the whole world is watching you and holding you to account, it's more difficult. And I think that takes some getting used to. And, maybe I'm reading too much into the situation, but just some of the moves that they've made, even some of the moves subsequent to that one hire that kind of went south, they made other hires and just seemed like to be in response to that. And like, look, we really are good people. And when people are trying to signal to me that they're good people, it makes me wonder if they really are good people. So I'm going way too far astray on this. I have questions about Urban Meyer. I have questions about every college coach that comes to the pro ranks. It's a different world, and players are in a different place. And I think that's the biggest hurdle, right? The players are making as much as you are. And you have to deal with them in a different way than you deal with college players. And I think over the course of time, in my opinion, that doesn't work out well in the end for the coaches moving up in the ranks. So I have questions about that. I mentioned Mike Dempsey. He covers the Jaguars on a daily basis in Jacksonville. And so we were just kind of bantering a little bit about this, and they think they have the right quarterback, or Shad Khan thinks he got it right with the quarterback and the coach. And I said, well, half of that I think they got right. And Dempsey kind of fired back and said, well, we'll see about the other half. And maybe I am overplaying my hand on this, that just like, man, the history of Urban Meyer to me is not a great history. Right. And so, I mean, winning history, yes, but just some of the backstory stuff and some of the players and things that have gone on around him, just, to me, just, I don't know. I'm not all in on him. And I hope I end up being totally wrong and the Jaguars are a great thing going forward, but I'm not sure about that. I do think they have the right quarterback, though. They drafted the right guy.
Now, if you stick with the wrong coach for too long, your right quarterback might not be the right quarterback, depending on how he looks. John Shipley, who I trust on all things Jack, said Trevor Lawrence looked like a rookie. Looks exactly like a rookie. Not, again, don't panic. One other one real quick before we go off the rails, okay? You get the feeling that Mike Zimmer... Well, we kind of are. You get the feeling that Mike Zimmer and the Vikings, like sometimes in the NFL, it's just time to move on. It's time to find a new partner. Are we there with Zimmer?
We were there 2 years ago. I felt like we were there 2 years ago. I think Mike Zimmer just seems like the guy who's mad about a lot of things that you just don't get to be mad about anymore, right? And so like. I kind of get it because maybe parts of me are that guy as well. I do feel like that. And I hope I'm wrong because he seems like a really sharp, coach in general, and teams have fared reasonably well. And we can go back to his coordinator days.
Right.
He was innovative. I just, I don't see that hard ass style is what gets you anywhere. And we'll find out. Joe Judge is going to figure that out too. I think, part of the hard ass style of coaching working is the working part. When it's working, players will go to great lengths to win, right? They want this as bad as everybody. I mean, there's this, no matter how much you're getting paid, you're playing this sport for a reason. Those games matter to you on Sunday and you want to get wins. And so I think there's no coaching style that is going to withstand losing. I mean, people may love you. Oh, you're a great guy. But I think when you're that edgy kind of, hardline coach, like old school coach like Zimmer is, and Joe Judge obviously is as well. I think that can shorten your career when things go south.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
I'm surprised it hasn't with Zimmer already. I think maybe it's just a case the Vikings owed him too much money, because I think that's that's the thing in Cincinnati. That's why every coach stays. Well, not every coach, but I think that's probably why Zach Taylor's still there. You don't want to fire him yet.
Yeah, well, Zach Taylor probably took the lowest number. They're like, we need a head coach. Right, we'll take this number.
That's a Browns thing. I mean, or a Bengals thing. It's just a Mike Brown thing. Just he's not gonna let anyone. Not gonna run anyone off early if he still owes them money.
Absolutely. Before we go off the rails here, I just want to remind everybody again, football guys, you like all this stuff. We're going to guide you through the season, IDP, DFS, Dynasty, everything you can imagine. For your fantasy football needs, you can still join Money Back Guarantee, footballguys.com/join. Okay, Bob. Again, I allude to this. I don't know how many people know the backstory. One of these days, I'm the horrible person, Bob, that talks about doing things and never does them. One of these days, we're going to do the podcast series, The Oral History of Fantasy Football. You're going to be episode 1. I'm just letting you know that. I'm springing this on you. But let's get a little preview of that, okay? First of all, for the folks out there, what year was it the first time you created some sort of fantasy football product?
It was the year of our Lord, 1993. Was when I started it. So I started playing in 86. And, when a friend came back from San Diego, he worked there, and he came back to our little group of friends, and he said, "You guys, I found this thing and you're going to love it." And we did. It was like, oh my God, how did we not figure this out on our own? And like literally 3 days into doing this thing, I was saying, we don't know enough to do this right. We don't have the information we need to do this correctly. We need to know more, right? And so that was kind of my, push for the next few years, was making sure I knew more. And then there came a point where I thought, man, a lot of people do this, and look, everyone's going to play this at some point. Once everyone realizes this exists, there's not going to be a human on earth that doesn't play fantasy football.
We're getting there. We're getting close, Bob.
Right. And so that was the goal, was to try to, give everyone the information that I know we all wanted, because we did. We all want it, and we still want it. It's part of the nature of, being a fantasy sports aficionado, is this desire to be in something, immersed in something, to steep in it and understand all the nuances and intricacies. And to do that, you need a big vat of information to soak in. And that was the goal back then. And it's obviously evolved greatly over the course of time, but the objective has changed 0%. It's, it's for all of us. It's making sure we know more than the other guy, right? That one little thing that gets you that little edge when you're setting your lineup every week, that other person isn't going to know, that you're going to be able to take advantage of. And, the evolution of that's been fascinating. We'll have to talk about that sometime too. Just the kind of things we're looking at and the kind of information we want to get us there. It's endless. And there's nothing about that part of it I don't love. Yeah.
It's like the lunar landers from the Apollo program, and like your phone is as powerful as like everything that was in the lunar lander.
Right.
Fantasy football is like that much. The other thing I assert is that fantasy football has changed how the NFL analyzes itself.
Sure.
It absolutely has. Okay. So making a total left turn from that, Bob. Okay. And I'm not going to allow you to say metal. Okay. What's something else that you can get immersed, steeped in, other than fantasy sports football? I took the easy answer away. I'm sorry. Yeah.
You did take the easy.
We do cats. Cue the montage of Bob and I talking about cats. I think we've probably talked about cats on this show 6 or 7 times, but it's because they're so it's endless. It's bottomless.
But honestly, it's music. I mean, that's the thing that's the place I would go,
Sure.
and I would do it with my cats. They would sit down and do the music with me. But yeah, the music is the place. Right. The music is the escape, and the place that I can immerse myself to the level that I can and work, in terms of relaxation. Like I like movies, and, I think everyone likes movies, and there's, and I'm a willing and able to sit down and watch them for extended periods of time when it's not football. But like the binge watching thing, I don't do as much, and like every time I do, I love it. And I binge like a mofo. I mean, I'm crazy. Sorry, Joe. But that's the problem also is I do. I mean, like I sit there and there's like shows that I've binged like what were the first shows I binged was like Sons of Anarchy. And it took me about a week of watching like 80 seasons of that and, back to back nonstop that, wow, this show was not designed to be watched like back to back. I mean, there's so much murder and lying that it was meant to be watched a week at a time. But like since, the newer series, and I've talked to my friend Nick Bakay about this, and he's created some of these series that are on Netflix, etc. And that they design them now. They know you're binge watching. And so they're designed to be watched, and they pace them in a way to do that. So I think that's a great thing. And I do a little of that. Like I did the Peaky Blinders this off season. And I also though recently did the entire Marvel from end to end. And had never done that. I watched Marvel movies, but never really, invested in the entire enterprise. And the entire enterprise is pretty damn amazing, right? I mean, just when you look at it like it just as a piece of business, like as an enterprise, like it's just like, and that's how the story's all entwined. That's pretty fascinating as well. So I can get into that kind of thing, but mostly I would prefer it just to be music because it's easier for me.
Okay, so lightning round on these topics. Okay, without knowing anything about the person, what show would you recommend to someone to binge watch? Number one recommendation. Oh, there it is. Heisenberg. Yeah, Albuquerque, right in the house. It's great. I feel like Albuquerque is a character in that show too.
Albuquerque is that, and Better Call Saul adds to that.
Sure.
With that part of it being the characters, and that's part of the reason I love it. But literally, living just a walking distance away from some of the more iconic locations from Breaking Bad is fantastic. I don't think you can go wrong with tons of series out there. I just felt like, I don't know how many times I feel like TV is smarter than me. And when I watched Breaking Bad, I felt like, this was smarter than me. They had thought this, they had thought this out well. And I'm, and there's been other shows where I feel like, I really love them, like The Sopranos, but it ended up like kind of meandering. And you're thinking, wow, they, at the end, I mean, okay, this was all really good and very entertaining, but was there a bigger point or whatever? So I kind of like I kind of like that. That would be my choice. I don't know if that I've done enough to like have really, because I didn't do like The Walking Dead or things like that.
There's so many.
Yeah, I mean, but I have honestly guilty pleasures like Naked and Afraid. I think is like, what the hell's the matter with those people? And I can't look away. It's like a horrible accident. And
I get it.
That's like
I get it.
Yeah, I can't. Not.
Breaking Bad. I'll say this about Breaking Bad also. Giancarlo Esposito was very important to the intensity of that show, really ramping up as it went on. It was just a fever dream that got more and more viewers. Give me a show that you tried to binge watch and just didn't make it.
There have been a couple. I want to say The Wire, but I don't think that's fair because I think there was just a season that wasn't as good as other seasons.
Okay.
And I kind of worked my way through it, and it was still okay in the end. But I felt like it lost steam. I thought it was like the most amazing thing early on. I thought it lost steam. And I thought Deadwood lost steam. Yet I watched every damn minute of it too. It just got confusing and weird. I'm going, what the hell's going on here? But I don't care. I want to see whatever it is.
Sure.
What did I start watching that I stopped? I don't quit anything. Once I start, it's hard for me to let go and quit. So I can't think of any that I really quit. I think there's been some that I wanted to, though. Like Sons of Anarchy, I probably wanted to. I just like, God, what's the matter with it?
It's too much. Yeah, too much. Okay.
We're
right up against the wire. So I just want the name. I just want the name and the artist. Okay. Give me a record, pretending we also have records. Give me an album from your collection that would surprise people. They'd say, Bob Harris listens to this?
If you know me well and know what I like these days, then I'll go ahead and I will throw out Who's Next, which would be like about 30%. It's crazy mellow compared to what I would listen to now. I think I have like a handful of what I consider perfect albums out there, and all of them are metal albums for the most. I mean, all of them except I would say Who's Next, which a nice classic rock, but it's just from there's not a bad note on it. There's not a bad sound on it. There's not a moment that doesn't feel exactly right throughout that entire course of that album. And so I put it right up there with Vulgar Display of Power, Master of Puppets, Seasons in the Abyss, some of the perfect metal albums. Stained Class is in that category as well. And one that's maybe not as mellow that I think is a perfect album, and maybe because I know them a little bit, is Dirt from Alice in Chains. The perception I had of that as a young person, and the perception I had of that band is like totally changed getting to know some of these guys and understanding what their thought processes were and how they see it. Makes it a lot more interesting and makes it even more perfect. But who's next? I loved The Who when I was a kid.
Perfect albums, perfect hour with Bob Harris at Football Die Hard. Folks, we love you. We love taking this journey with you. It's on. Stay classy.